Today I'm joined by Brad West. Brad is a graduate of the University of Victoria and the St. Francis Xavier University. He became politically active at a very early age, beginning his career as a staffer in the office of BC MLA Mike Farnworth. He was elected to the City Council for Port Coquitlam in 2008 at the young age of 23, and then won re-election to the council in 2011 and 2014. He then ran for mayor in 2018 and received 88% of the vote, the highest in Port Coquitlam's history. Even better, he improved on this performance in 2022 when he won 100% of the votes, running for re-election unopposed. Brad is a committed husband and father. I think you and I have sons that are similar age.
That's right.
Big into sports, hockey and lacrosse.
Yes, sir.
On today's show, we are going to be focusing on three key issues: immigration, city core services, and the merging of municipalities is a topic I'm interested in. Mayor West, welcome back to Coastal Front.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
All right, great.
It's been a long time.
It has been. Yeah, you were one of our early guests back when we started this 2018 or 19.
Yeah, I was very new into the role as mayor.
Yeah.
And be interesting for me to go back and see if any of the things I had to say then are, ring true today.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to pull the old files at some point. Look, this topic of immigration, a lot of people might wonder, well, why are you talking to a small Metro Vancouver mayor?
Medium.
Medium. I apologize. Medium size, a mayor of medium-sized municipality in Metro Vancouver. But look, you've been very outspoken. I actually remember seeing you downtown here. I think it was probably like 2018 or 19 when you delivered a box of Tim Hortons donuts to the Chinese consulate, I think it was. Was that not right?
Yeah, that's right. It was at the Union of BC Municipalities Conference, which at the time the Chinese government was sponsoring. So they pay money, they sponsor the conference. It brings in all the mayors and city councilors from across the province, and and then they can hobnob with them and wine and dine them and all the rest of it. And at the same time that was happening, of course, we had two of our citizens being held hostage by the Chinese government. And so I took exception to that, along with many other people. And there was a protest event, which was actually organized by Chinese Canadians who oppose the Chinese government. People who are they themselves being horribly persecuted by the Chinese government. So they held a protest event and said, this is unethical. And I went and spoke at, and they had a box of Tim Hortons donuts. And they said, would you go deliver these as I have a symbolic sort of gesture? And I said, sure, why the hell not?
Yeah.
And I did. And they weren't too happy to see me, I'll tell you that.
Well, I wonder if they at least quietly enjoyed those afterwards. But look, Brad, we're excited to have you here. And for those listeners and viewers who might not be familiar with Brad and I have stayed connected over the years since you did come on the podcast the first time. You are very outspoken about failed policies in immigration. That's why we're going to talk about this, because I think you've got a very good view on this. You've written opinion pieces on this about the rapid immigration that Canada's it's affecting our Canadian cities and our infrastructure. We have a graph here issued by the Fraser Institute, and it shows this dramatic increase in what's referred to as non-permanent immigrants, largely temporary foreign workers and students. Now, we're seeing this drop off under our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, but if you go back to the early 2000s, the split between permanent immigrants and non-permanent immigrants was about 50-50. And the numbers were quite small. I mean, we're talking less than 500,000 people. And as of 2024, we're looking at total immigration that exceeds 2 million people.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe to start, before I get into my specific questions, tell me about your observation and how this is affecting municipalities like Port Coquitlam and other Metro Vancouver municipalities.
Sure. And this is really why I'm speaking out on this as often as I can, because the consequences of Ottawa's decision are felt in communities on the ground. They're felt by our residents. they're felt at City Hall. And what I mean by that is you cannot go through such a short period of time with such supercharged population growth and not have consequences to that. And the consequences are both seen and unseen. They're seen when you go to the hospital and you see a system that is just overwhelmed. It used to be that maybe as an aberration, there would be an 8, 10, 12-hour emergency room wait. And now it happens with regularity. Portables dot the landscape all over the place because our schools are overwhelmed. We have not kept pace with investment in infrastructure. To me, one of the big challenges is what we don't see. We have, I think, underneath our feet, a ticking time bomb on infrastructure and particularly around utilities. So, our communities were planned over many generations, and they always intended to concentrate housing growth in certain areas. And that's how communities were developed. And as that changed, it changed gradually in a methodical and planned way where cities could anticipate growth, could plan for upgrades to water and sanitary and all the utilities that make society and communities function. And it was orderly. What's happened in recent years is because there has been such a explosion in population, and what comes with that is demands for various services, chief among them housing, is the province comes along and they say, okay, your carefully crafted community plans are out the window. And instead, we're going to apply a blanket upzoning of housing density right across the board. What it means is that carefully thought out plan of utility upgrades is no longer applicable because any person on a single individual lot is now guaranteed a certain level of density that the neighborhoods that were constructed never intended to host. And so if we want to be able to do things like flush our toilets and have drinking water and all of these other things, that has to be part of the equation, and it's not. And both the federal and provincial government have not come to the table with anywhere near the amount of funding required to upgrade all of these utilities.
Right.
So it's as if they said, okay, we're going to welcome all these people into our communities, and we're just going to pretend that they're not going to have any needs, and they're not going to put any strain on infrastructure, on government services. And so our community is like every community in the province where we're feeling the brunt of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important that we connect those dots, that when a decision like that is made in Ottawa, which I think is, if you look back over the history of our country, has to be one of the most reckless decisions that has ever been made, and is going to take us a hell of a lot of time to deal with. It is communities and people on the ground who suffer the consequences of it. So that's why I've spoken out as strongly as I have. And I think your graph tells the story. You've got a level of stability over several decades, and also, by the way, over many different types of government, liberal, conservative, but there's a level of stability there. There was a consensus about how we're going to deal with population growth and how we're going to deal with immigration. And then under the previous prime minister, that was completely jettisoned. My own view of why they did it is because they oversaw the transformation of our economy to one that is incredibly dependent upon real estate. When you think about British Columbia, you think about the industries that our province has been synonymous with: forestry, mining, agriculture, fisheries. energy. Through their regulatory regime, they wrestled those to the ground, and in its place, we now have an economy that lives and dies based on real estate. Well, that requires a constant source of newcomers to be able to sell homes to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think you saw it just go off the charts and every historic norm was tossed aside. And so we have got to get back to some normalcy around this. And at the end of the day, this is about math. Like, the math dictates that you cannot sustain that level of population growth that we saw in such a short period of time.
Brad, I'm going to help support your argument with the math you're talking about. From 1971 to 2021, the average year-over-year population growth in Canada was just over 1%, 1.12. But from 2022 to 2024 alone, that population growth ballooned to 2.6%, almost 3%,
Mm-hmm.
almost 3 times the amount that we experienced for the last roughly 40, 50 years. Were municipalities consulted with either the federal government in their decision to drastically increase the amount of immigrants coming into our country? Or were you consulted with the provincial government before they made these sweeping changes to real estate policy?
I don't think anyone was consulted, and certainly not local government. Because I think if you had
no one called you up as a guy who's pretty...
No one called, no one consulted, and not just me, but you can go ask just about any mayor in the province, and there was no consultation. There was a tick-the-box consultation after the fact. This is what we're doing. What do you think? By the way, we're doing it. So I don't know in what universe that constitutes consultation, but that was essentially what the province did. The federal government, I don't think, consulted anyone. Because I think that if they had been upfront about what their plans were, the public would have had a very negative reaction to it, as we're seeing they are now.
Yeah.
Because I think people innately understand this, right? They understand that when you go from, stability of population growth to something that is off the charts, I mean, we really have to get our head wrapped around how extreme this was.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a G7 country that has come close to Canada's rate of population growth. And again, it did not come with the necessary investment for infrastructure or government services. It wasn't as if there was a really well thought out plan that said, okay, we are going to ramp up population growth, but attached with that is going to be funding for basic infrastructure, for core government services. No, they wash their hands of all that. The provincial government likes to say to municipalities who are now dealing with the consequences of these decisions around infrastructure, they like to say, oh, but we gave you a couple $1 million 2 years ago. I mean, is not even close to a drop in the bucket. What they have unleashed is, again, in my view, a huge liability, financial liability, that is popping up all over the place as all these utility upgrades need to occur, because they're not nice to haves, they're must haves if we're going to function. So there was no consultation. They did it. They washed their hands of the consequences, and now we see all the fallout.
Yeah, well said. I have another table here that you can take a look at, Brad, and for those who are maybe not able to see this because they're listening to this in their car while they're driving, it's the annual population growth in Canada. This is from Statistics Canada. Annual population growth in Canada from 1991 till 2023. From 2001 till 2015, the average annual increase in Canada's population was around 320,000 people. And from 2016 to 2023, that jumped from 320,000 people to 612,000, with 2023 being over 1 million people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely astonishing. And I know that there's some who might say, "Oh, well, this is." I hate to use the word, but we're by even just breaching this topic. It has tones of racism around them. But as you stated, this is a mathematical issue. It doesn't matter where these people are coming from. Do you have a take on that? Because I'm sure you've heard that before.
I have, and I think that attitude does such a disservice to the discourse in our country.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to talk about these issues. And yes, we need to be able to talk about them in a way that is not xenophobic or racist. But as you just correctly stated, this is not about pinning all these problems on the individual immigrant or temporary foreign worker or international student.
Yeah. They're just trying to get a better life for themselves.
Absolutely.
I don't blame them at all.
Not for a second.
No.
They've done nothing wrong. It's our government.
Correct.
Who have stupidly created this scenario. And they're doing exactly what I think every single one of us does, which is we try and make a better life for ourselves and our family.
Yeah.
So
well said.
In no way, shape, or form are they to blame for this. It is the decisions of our government that have led us here.
Yeah.
And you're right about the increase, and you gave some of the numbers. And in the Metro Vancouver context, think about this. Up until about a year and a half ago, the expectation was that our region would see about 50,000 new people every single year, which is like adding the population of the city of North Vancouver every single year.
Right.
And that is historically would be a very high number.
Right.
And
just to confirm, that's for all of Metro Vancouver.
That's for all of Metro
and
Vancouver.
You're talking 50,000 net new.
Exactly right.
Okay.
But when the numbers came out, it was off by a mile.
What were we seeing? I don't know.
What we actually added was almost 140,000 people new every single year.
Wow.
So we said it was going to be 50. All the bean counters and all the people who say, well, this is what it's going to be, and this is what we got planned for. It's going to be 50,000-ish a year in this region. And then when the numbers came out, it was closer to 140,000. So they missed it way off the mark.
Yeah.
And again, you think about a region like ours that is ground zero for a housing affordability crisis.
Sure.
You don't have to work in the rocket engine room to figure out what adding 140,000 people in a single year does to that.
Yeah.
And again, this is what we're grappling with. And unfortunately, there are no easy fixes now.
Yeah.
There's no pain-free way of dealing with all of this.
Sure.
It's going to take some time, and there's going to have to be some really tough decisions made to try and get back to normalcy.
Well, it's a good segue into our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Now, he's been vocal in saying that he's promised that we're going to bring down immigration levels, and he's focused on students. Now, I happen to be friends with a few professors at universities, say, for example, like at Langara College, and they're in, or Langara University, maybe as they're called now. And they're in big trouble there right now because they did not diversify. They went all in on the foreign student because they were paying these enormous tuition fees. In fact, their one department, their marketing department, they had 32 marketing professors 2 years ago. They're down to 7 now. I mean, it's just been mass layoffs. Do you guys have any colleges or universities in Port Coquitlam?
We don't. The closest one would be Simon Fraser University.
Simon Fraser,
yeah.
So when I look at this first graph that we were looking at, this massive increase in population growth, the colorful one from the Fraser Institute, and I hear Mark Carney say, well, we'll just lower this and these people will not be renewed their temporary status. But then you think about it on a practical level. If I'm a young person from India or China or one of these countries where life is probably a heck of a lot better here than it is where they came from, and I lose my status to be a temporary resident here, and I'm being asked to now go home, I'm probably not going to go home.
No.
And so to your point, I mean, this is going to be tough, is I don't think it's easy to let these people in, but once they're here and they're integrated into our society and they've got a job, I don't know how we just unwind this thing.
It's like anything in life. It's easy to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
Much harder to get out of it.
Yeah.
And you're right. These are the practicalities and the reality of all of these decisions.
Yeah.
It's very easy for a politician to get up and say, okay, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. In this instance, we're going to let all these permits expire, or we're going to let a number of them expire.
Yeah, I mean,
to your point, who in the federal government is going to ensure that these people leave?
Right.
And I'm sure many of them, some of them may have formed, there could be relationships, there could be families,
sure,
put down, like all of it, right?
Yeah.
Life will happen.
Yeah.
And so again, this is why it is incredibly irresponsible and reckless what has been allowed to happen, because now you're dealing with real life consequences to those decisions.
I mean, it's in a way we're almost creating by failed government policy a similar issue to the Americans are dealing with today, because you're turning these people, if they're not being renewed, and that's the whole idea. I mean, it's not about not bringing in more immigrants. It's about like these temporary immigrants not being renewed their status, and now you're turning them into illegal immigrants. Because again, I mean, I'm not, we'll wait to see, I guess, how this unfolds, but I don't know again, if I'm a young person and I'm from India and I've got this life now in Canada and have a relationship you've described, or I've got a job and my employer is willing to kind of pay me cash so I don't have to, kind of try and fly under the radar. And we're kind of almost in a way turning these young people into criminals now.
Mm-hmm.
When they're probably law-abiding citizens, but now we're like, well, you're not allowed to live here anymore. And like, well, I was given the other problem I see with this, especially with these students, because I've seen this, I employ some of these people myself who thankfully have gone on to become permanent residents, in some cases citizens. But I think we did a terrible job in policing the entire education institutions.
Yes.
There was a lot of these bogus, and I'm going to call out one in particular, Canada West University. I mean, you've kind of hit peak, like, I'd almost call it education fraud, when they're like, they've got the biggest billboard ad at the Rogers Arena.
Yeah.
Like this unknown university. And if you know who they attract, all of their entire business model is based on attracting foreign students to go to the Canada West University. They're not a legitimate institution, in my opinion, like Simon Fraser, UBC, or University of Victoria. And these young people kind of bought into the idea that if I go to school at Canada West University, get myself some bogus undergraduate degree, pay like insane amounts of tuition fees, but then I'm given a 2-year work permit, which leads me into a PR, which gets me citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of young people and families who forget about the very wealthy families from mainland China who can just write the check and don't really care.
Yeah.
There's a lot of families who sent their kids over here, and I know this anecdotally, where they've had to kind of put all the family resources together to get their one child what they thought was going to be a pathway to immigration or to citizenship in Canada. And I think it's a real tragedy.
Tragedy is the right word for it. You think about a family that has sacrificed everything. As you described, they have marshaled every last dollar they can and pinned their entire hopes on sending, their son or daughter to Canada, to be able to go to school, to be able to put down roots, to, establish themselves and have a better life. And the predators that exist that have just preyed upon a sense that every parent has. I mean, in my opinion, it should be criminal. It is such a tragedy. And the worst part of it is, it's not like people didn't know that it was going on.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. They weren't even trying to hide it. It was right there in front of your face. You described one, and there's many others. Some are big, some are small. But everybody knew.
Yeah.
Everybody. Government knew, and they did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And what one hell of a problem have they created now because of it.
Yeah, I agree. Brad, you know most of the mayors in British Columbia. You certainly know all the mayors in Metro Vancouver. Is there any particular municipality in Metro Vancouver, Fraser Valley, that you sense from talking to your fellow mayors who are really seeing the impact of this failed immigration policy? I'm assuming it's not Port Coquitlam. You're not as bad as some others.
No.
Who's really feeling the brunt of this?
Surrey.
Surrey is.
Without question. Because Surrey is a destination city for immigrants, both permanent and non-permanent.
I mean, they have a massive South Asian community.
They do.
And what we don't have on this graph, but we know is well documented, is the majority of these temporary immigrants have come from India.
Yep. And Surrey has just a rapidly growing population. One of the reasons for that is availability of land. It's not constrained in the same way that, say, a Port Coquitlam is, right? We're bound by 3 rivers. We have a limited land mass. Surrey is very large geographically. And it's the reason why it's expected to surpass Vancouver in population in a few years. And so Surrey is ground zero for it. It's ground zero for portables. It's ground zero for people not being able to access healthcare services, for massive waiting lists for childcare. And I talked to the mayor of Surrey a lot, and they are grappling with this every single day with the limited abilities that a local government has. And I think you probably see that sense of frustration reflected in the last provincial election results, where the current government was almost wiped out in Surrey. They went from holding the vast majority of seats in Surrey to only barely hanging on to a couple.
Right.
And I think it's because this whole frustration around pressure on services and just feeling, overwhelmed with congestion and all of it, it is felt in Surrey more than anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that there's also some social outfall from this as well. Canada right now has a 7.1% unemployment rate.
Mm-hmm.
And again, anecdotally, my wife and I were looking for a housekeeper probably 6 months ago. We put a posting in, it was like Kijiji or Indeed or something. And I can't believe the number of applications we got in like a 48-hour period. It was like 400 applications. And I just took, out of interest, I took time to just talk to a few of these people to see what their deal was. Because a lot of them were students. A lot of them were students at Canada West University. And everyone I spoke to said, look, I'm only allowed to work 20 hours a week as part of my work permit or my residency permit. But if you're willing to pay me cash, I'll work as much as you want me to.
Right. Because
I got to be able to afford my rent, and I can't afford my rent. I got 2 roommates and live in a basement suite. And, it's throughout history, it's well documented that when people don't have jobs, you have civil unrest.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at our Canadian landscape today. This is a big, more broader picture question for you, Brad. But when I look at the Canadian landscape today and I look at the conflict economically with the United States and currently with Donald Trump, I look at what other nations are doing, like China. I spent a month in China this summer and really got a new perspective on the world. I don't know what's going to cause us to lower our unemployment rate. And I actually think our unemployment rate is actually even higher because there's a lot of people who they're not deemed as unemployed, but they're out there working right now, but under the table.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on this?
Yeah. Well, first, I think that the way in which these programs have been devised has given birth to an even larger underground economy than traditionally exists. And I understand it, it always exists to a degree. But exactly your point, a lot of people working for cash, a lot of people probably working in pretty unsafe conditions, doing things that are probably not that great because they have to make their basic requirements to live. They got to make rent. They have to be able to eat. And so I think that has really fueled that. And I hear it anecdotally as well.
Right.
The government doesn't like to really dig too deep into this. And they always are, well, it's just anecdotal. Well, yeah, it's anecdotal because they won't try and actually get a handle on it and be able to have statistics on it, because then they might have stats that show we have a real problem here and what are you doing about it. But the other point you raise, I think, is an important one, and it's one of social cohesion and integration. And that's an important part of having a healthy society. We, at least in my view, we want to be able to have newcomers who are integrated into Canadian society, who can be, part and parcel of it, who can add richness to it by bringing in their own experiences and culture. But it has to be from a perspective of creating unity and cohesion. And what I see happening is too much division. And I think you're right. Economic angst is always followed by social angst. And you see that over the history of all societies. And we better get a handle on that, or else we could be in a very bad place.
I agree. So Surrey's kind of the epicenter of this outfall from your observation. What are you hearing from your fellow mayors, like the mayor of Surrey or others that are feeling the impact of this failed immigration policy? Like, you've described the issues they're facing. How are they trying to tackle it? What are their solutions? What are they what are they trying to do right now to help deal with this? Because
I think all of them in their own way, and everyone has their own unique way and style of approaching things, but they're all trying to advocate for what's best for their community. One of the challenges you experience as a mayor is you're kind of grappling with what's immediately in front of you. A project that has to get done, a utility upgrade that needs to be funded, whatever it is. And so you end up spending way too much of your time having to beg the provincial and federal government for money. The city needs a grant for this. City needs a grant for that. And when you do that, you can kind of lose sight of the bigger picture. Why are we in a position of having to chase all these one-off grants to be able to upgrade a utility to meet the consequences of the decisions that have been made by the federal and provincial government? So I get it, because it's a real and immediate thing that has to be dealt with. But I also think we need to, because mayors do have a big microphone in the province, in the country, I think we also need to be articulating a bigger picture vision for our communities, and to really be able to articulate the consequence of different approaches. So you have to, I think, try and be able to thread that needle and to do both. But I don't see mayors kind of just quietly sitting by and like in their own ways, and some get more attention than others. I do think they're trying to push back and really show the province and the feds what it means on the ground because of decisions that have been made.
We're going to switch and it's actually a good segue into our next topic, which is core services by municipalities. It's a topic I'm very interested in. I'm obviously a resident here in Vancouver. I've been living in the same home since 2013, and I'm still just, when I look at how much I pay in property taxes, and I look at the street I have to drive up and down on every day to come to work, I don't know why we can't just get our road paved properly. I mean, I've only been there for like 11 years, and it's just astonishing to me. I've had Lon LeClaire, who's the head of engineering for City of Vancouver, and twice on our podcast, and he's talked about the challenges he faces with respect to pipes and sewage, water, and the upgrades they're having to do. To what you pointed out at the beginning of our conversation, Brad, with this massive increase in population, is just like they're having a hard time keeping up. So before we go into some of the topics about core services of a municipality, you're the mayor of the city of Port Coquitlam, but you're also on Metro Vancouver's board, correct?
Yep.
For those listeners and viewers who don't know the difference, can you explain in kind of like real layman's terms what the difference is between and what the responsibilities are of the city of Port Coquitlam, or for that matter, City of Vancouver, versus what Metro Vancouver oversees?
Right. Metro Vancouver, which used to be the Greater Vancouver Regional District, is essentially the municipalities in the region coming together to do a couple of core functions: water, sewer, regional parks, and then it's grown into other areas. They do some regional planning, they do some housing, but at its core, if you go back to why it was created, it's around utilities, right? Because if you live south of the Fraser, you get your drinking water from north of the Fraser, right? And the region is connected that way. We all benefit from different pieces of the puzzle that come from different municipalities. So that's why it exists, and that is its primary responsibility. Now, there's been a lot of discussion, and certainly I have an opinion about it having expanded its scope beyond some of those core utilities.
It has?
It has.
Okay.
And I wasn't around to be able to say why it went into this area and why it went into that area. What I'll observe is that I think there is this habit in government and in local government to, at points in time, probably motivated by good reasons, of wanting to go and, we see a need over here, we'll go do it. Yeah, it's the province's responsibility. Yeah, it's the federal government's responsibility, but they're doing a shitty job of it, and we got to go fix it and do it. And you do that in isolation a bunch of times, and all of a sudden, you've got yourself a pretty big size government and bureaucracy and
Right.
all the rest of it. And so I think that has taken place in some respects with Metro Vancouver, but also with other local governments. And it has been one of the defining characteristics of my time as mayor in Port Coquitlam is that we have been focused like a laser beam on what the municipality is actually responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
The things that people actually send their tax dollars to City Hall to get taken care of. And my philosophy is we have got to get those basics right. And maybe if we do, then yeah, maybe there's other needs that we can then turn our attention to. But our first and foremost responsibility has got to be those items. And so that has been...
Like paving a residential street.
Exactly. We have a very specific...
Maybe I should move to
right?
Coquitlam.
Well, you should, because we also have the lowest taxes in the Lower Mainland. And I think those two things are not unconnected.
Right.
We've been able to focus our investment in those core services. So we've actually brought on new services and have been able to do that without blowing the budget, right? So we now do a large item pickup where every resident in Port Coquitlam can get 6 items picked up by the city: couches, mattress, the stuff that's hard to get rid of. And we'll come take that away and we'll deal with it and we'll get recycled or what have you. And there's no cost to that.
Wow.
To the individual property owner. We introduced a curbside glass pickup program. We didn't have that before, so we've been able to roll that out where, city crews now come and take your glass recycling away. We don't charge to swim at our outdoor pools. They're free for our residents. So we've been able to actually expand our service offering because our investment is on our responsibility. It's not trying to duplicate or triplicate things that are the bailiwick of the provincial or federal government, like especially on the regulatory regime. Some municipalities will, especially in the area of climate initiatives, they want to take what the province is doing, which is already incredibly ambitious, and one up them, right? So we're staying in our lane. And it doesn't mean that we ignore other issues. We speak to them really strongly. We advocate for them, push the feds and the province on it. But I can guarantee you this. If I were to say, okay, province and federal government are really dropping the ball on this particular issue, so I'm going to come and have the city do it, the people would be the happiest with that will be the provincial and federal government.
Sure.
And because, right?
Yeah.
And they can wash their hands. And they have been able to do that on a whole host of issues. And what has it resulted in? It hasn't really resulted in a better outcome in that particular issue because the city is still hamstrung with trying to deal with it just on property taxes.
Sure.
And property taxes were never intended as a way to fund and solve complex societal issues, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to fund basic government service at the municipal level.
Yeah.
So that has been my mantra.
Yeah.
And I think it's working well for us.
Well, good for you. And I'm a big believer in the free market, and the free market gets to represent itself every 4 years by going to the polls and voting. And the fact that you got reelected uncontested, I think, says something. I know you're well-liked mayor in your municipality. So on this topic of mayors and municipalities who have digressed into other issues that should be left to the hands of the provincial and federal government, I think it's a really interesting comment you've made. Now, a lot of the bigger city mayors, and I'm not saying I'm not going to pick out one because I don't have any quotes, but in general, they often say, well, Brad West, he's a mayor of a small municipality. He doesn't know what it's like to be the mayor of Vancouver or Richmond or Surrey, with all of our added, challenges that we face, especially Vancouver. What's your response to that?
Well, first I would say medium. Remember, Port Coquitlam is now almost 70,000 people.
Yeah.
So
sorry, my mistake. I've said it twice now. Yeah, medium.
That's okay.
Yeah,
we qualify as medium.
How many people live in Port Coquitlam?
Almost 70,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But I'm not pretending I have all the answers, and I empathize with mayors of larger cities that have inherited and have found themselves having to deal with complex issues that, didn't materialize overnight.
Mm-hmm.
They have,
well, downtown east side
for sure. They've come into being over an extended period of time. But I do think you can take the attitude and philosophy that we have, and you can scale that up. The provincial government has a big role to play, but if they're constantly being bailed out by the municipality, nothing will ever change.
Right.
I
think it's such a good point.
So
Like I've often wondered why aren't it like, I'm going to be critical of Ken here for a moment, Ken Sim, but like what, if I was the mayor of Vancouver, maybe he does do this, but if I was the mayor of Vancouver, I would be insisting on a Monday morning call with the premier every single week, 52 weeks out of the year, to talk about these issues you're describing, Brad, because the city will go bankrupt trying to fix these bigger, complex problems that municipalities were never designed to do.
Yeah. And you'll recall that on the downtown east side, the premier said not that long ago that it is too complex and the province is going to take direct responsibility for it. Well, how is that working out?
Right.
One of the things that I've learned in dealing with the provincial and federal government is they are unmoved by just saying, we're angry at you. You're doing a bad job, or you're ignoring this issue or that issue. Unfortunately, it is a reality that what they respond to is a crisis. And as long as the municipality is there opening its wallet, throwing money at problems that are their responsibility and not moving the needle, you can have a million press conferences telling them that they need to do better. They're not going to. You have to, I think, create an incentive for them to actually take some action. And part of that is by not funding their responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. How often, as a mayor of a medium-sized municipality in BC, do you get to speak with our Premier, David Eby?
I would say that I probably speak to the Premier maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
One-on-one?
There would be, a cast of thousands of staff. Not on my side. I don't have a bunch of staff. I usually go to these meetings alone, just myself.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that,
Are you being heard by the provincial government?
Well, I mean, I think I'm being heard because I get pretty loud and hard to ignore and probably a bit annoying in that way.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
I think the bigger thing is, are you being listened to?
Right. Are you being listened to, Brad?
I think it's a pretty mixed record on that. And I'm not naive about this. I know, things don't, happen overnight. It's not all of a sudden, we had this meeting and, the mayor made some really good points. So bam, done. Right. Like I get that it takes time and it's complex. But I am concerned about the direction that the province is heading in on a number of issues. And I don't think the government listens enough. I think that they become very stubborn and dig in their heels when they have made a decision. And they've usually made that decision without consultation. I think the housing legislation is a perfect example that we spoke of earlier. They have taken all of that careful community planning, tossed it out the window. They've brought in their housing legislation. It's kind of unleashed chaos. It was intended to just, spur on all this development and all this home building. It's never been worse. Because what they've actually...
to pause for a quick second, Brad, just to make sure we're clear so the listeners and viewers understand what we're talking about. In particular, are we talking about this legislation that any single family lot can immediately be converted into a 4-plex, or if it's in a high metro area, high transit area, can be converted to a 6-plex?
That's certainly one of them. And then they've also done some other legislation around properties that they define as being close to a frequent transit network.
Okay.
And some of that...
And that applies across the entire province now,
across the entire province.
Yeah.
And
so planned community stuff is, forget it. It's out the window.
Well, because it's blanket upzoning.
Yeah.
Right? So
right.
It's just... And so that has had a lot of consequences. But as that has unfolded, and it's now very clear that rather than unleashing a bunch of new homes, what it has unleashed is uncertainty. And builders and the market and business does not like uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And so you talk to any person who's in the industry and they'll say it has never been worse. It's not entirely just because of that. There's many different factors, but it certainly hasn't helped. The government cannot find its way to massage or tinker or adjust or take the edge off any of it. And they've had more meetings than you could shake a stick at with mayors that say, this is the consequence, this is where it's not working. People who are planners, people who are well credentialed in the area, just about everyone in the industry, from realtors to municipalities to home builders, they're all saying to the government the same thing, like, this isn't working. It's created a lot of problems. But they just kind of have this tunnel vision. I think
they're sticking to their guns.
Yeah, there's a level of stubbornness. And I think this happened. And again, it's not a partisan thing. I think governments, when they reach a certain point in their time in government, I mean, people would have said this of Gordon Campbell.
Sure.
Right? That there was a level of arrogance and stubbornness that came in.
Stephen Harper with
right?
Conservatives.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of different examples. I think that is coming through in my interactions with government on a whole host of things.
Okay, so you commented on the housing one, which I tend to agree with, but what are some of the other big ones that you feel the provincial government's stubborn on today?
Absolutely no question has been this experiment that they've taken us through with drug decriminalization. And they'll tell you that they've backed it up a little bit. But the problem is they let the genie out of the bottle, and it's very difficult to get it back in. You talk to any police officer now, right? They have a hell of a time dealing with individuals who basically were told that anything goes in terms of public drug use, right?
Yeah.
So they took us to this place despite anyone with an ounce of common sense telling them that this was going to create a lot of disorder. It was going to create an increase in public drug use. It was going to have a number of consequences that were going to be detrimental to communities. And they heard it, but did they listen to it? No.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, they still cling to it, right? We still are not seeing a different approach on addiction that emphasizes treatment, recovery, prevention. That's something I think about as a parent. I've had the discussion with my kids, even at the age they are now, 8 and 4, more the 8-year-old than the 4-year-old. He's kind of there and he's listening.
Yeah.
But about the dangers of drugs. And it doesn't come from a sort of Pollyanna-ish, naive view of the world. But I have a responsibility as a parent to equip my children with information and education so they can make good, informed decisions. Are we in our school system talking to kids about the dangers of drug use? No. We're in our school system telling kids how to use drugs safely.
Yeah. And
you don't have to take my word for it. You go do a simple Google search and you'll see all sorts of examples. Probably the most recent one was in, I believe it was Nanaimo, where the school district handed out safe drug snorting kits and education about how to, in their words, use drugs safely. So there's an area where I think we have got ourselves so off course,
mm-hmm.
and have an approach that defies common sense, logic, anything that a normal thinking person would understand.
Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, you can just see it in the streets. You know, I've been working in downtown Vancouver for the last 20 years. Spent my teenage and university years in Victoria, where my family still lives. I mean, look at Pandora Street in Victoria. Never had any homeless people. There were a handful of homeless people, and they weren't even. They didn't appear to be like addicted drug users like you see today. These sort of zombies, right? And it's again, talking about tragedies, there's another tragedy right there.
It's a horrible human tragedy, and there's probably not a family in this province, including my own, untouched by the addiction crisis that we have in the province.
Yeah.
And I find it so maddening that when the government went down this road, and as the entirely predictable consequences played out, their approach was to deny, deflect, and to denigrate anyone who had the gall to say,
right,
this seems like it's not working, that it's getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
You have no evidence of that. That's anecdotal.
You're not being progressive.
Where's your compassion?
Yes.
Stop stigmatizing people.
Right. Yeah.
It reminded me of Orwell, right?
Right.
Ignore the evidence of your eyes and your ears.
Mm-hmm.
That was the final and most important command that the party gave to people. And that sort of was their approach.
Yeah.
That, no, what you're seeing isn't happening. But of course, everyone knows that's exactly what is happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, while we're on this theme of failed government policy, we've highlighted a couple of the ones at the provincial level. Brad, in your opinion, other than immigration, what else is the federal government failing on right now?
I think there's two things, and they go hand in hand. One is really around infrastructure. The approach that the federal government takes to infrastructure, I don't know a universe in which it makes sense. They will have municipalities having to hire a consultant to fill out reports and grant applications to chase money that will then come, 2 or 3 years later. Like, you cannot convince me that there is not a better way of distributing federal dollars to local government. It's as if
what kind of infrastructure projects? Just to simplify this for the listeners.
Well, let's use here's a good example. Okay, so in Metro Vancouver, we're looking to have an expansion of our public transit system, right? There's overcrowding. It hasn't kept pace with population growth. There's lots of parts of the region that are underserved by public transit. It's important to business. It's important to the economy. It's important. The federal government announces in 2020, with much fanfare, we're going to have a permanent transit fund in our country that's going to lay out federal contributions to public transit projects, because the federal government always is involved in making a capital contribution to the larger projects.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, okay, we're going to, rather than having you chase this, we're going to have this permanent transit fund. Great idea. That was in 2020. 5 years later, not a dollar has come from that fund. Why? Because it takes them, I guess, 5 years to figure out the structure and the bureaucracy, and they're going to spend God knows how much money trying to figure out how to give out money. So that is just one example of a litany of examples where we seem to have lost sight of the fact that this is all taxpayer money.
Right, exactly.
It's one taxpayer.
Yeah.
And to have governments, different levels of government competing with each other, they've created a whole industry of consultants who will show up at your door and do a dog and pony show for you about how if you hire them, they can get you on the inside track for a grant.
Really?
Right? Like, it's absurd that that's how government would
That's
function.
insane. Yeah.
Right? But I can assure you that is very much alive and well.
Wow.
So there's something that the federal government can fix.
Okay. Municipalities in BC are not permitted to run deficits. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Certainly, it would be nice to have the similar situation with provincial and federal governments these days. The BC government just announced, or it was determined that they're running around a $12 billion deficit. I think it's $11.6 billion, expected to exceed $12 billion next year. I was running the math on this, and it's an insane number. Like, if you actually take, just to put some perspective, like $12 billion, which is $1 billion a month, you take $1 billion and then you divide that by, call it 30 days in a month.
Mm-hmm.
It's $33 million a day. This podcast interview is going to take us about an hour. By the time this interview is over, the provincial government alone will have burned through roughly $1.4 million. Excess of what they're bringing in dollars.
Yeah.
It's an astonishing number.
It is.
I mean, it kind of looks like what we had to spend in COVID look like chump change.
Mm-hmm.
What's your view on fiscal responsibility when it comes to government?
Well, I think it's incredibly key to everything government does, because if you don't have that level of fiscal sustainability, the clock is ticking. And the consequences of dealing with it are inevitable. And if it's not at the core of what you're doing, you are just setting yourself up and the people you're elected to serve up for failure, because you can't outrun it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not going to be able to outrun this problem. You can't wish it away. And so it's remarkable how quickly this happened as well. It wasn't that long ago that the province was posting a fairly healthy surplus. And so, you know, in a short period of time of a couple years, we've gone from that to where we are. Do people feel like government services have gone better in that period of time? Are there better outcomes in healthcare, in education, in childcare? Do we have all sorts of new infrastructure that we can point to say, well, yes, but look what we have? I think most people would tell you no.
Yeah.
And so we've got a real big hole to dig ourselves out of.
Yeah.
And
it is a hole, Brad. I mean, look, you know, I think most of our viewers and listeners of our show they're pretty financially strong and they understand finances. But it's no different than your own personal finances. I mean, if you go into debt because you spent more than you made this year, at some point in your life, you got to pay it back.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you can't wish it away, as you said.
Yes.
And if it's not on you and I, it's on our kids.
For sure. That's why the difference between municipalities that are not allowed to run a deficit have to have a balanced budget. You know what that forces you to do? It forces you not to kick the can down the road. You have to make the hard decisions and sometimes unpopular decisions here and now. You can't just say, well, that's going to be the other guy's problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're able to do provincially. Can just keep kicking the can down the road. Now, as we said, eventually you can't. But it creates that culture. When I look at what has happened as well, I can't help but remark on the stupidity of this unilateral disarmament that the province has undertaken. We are so...
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is this. We are so blessed in British Columbia with abundant resources that other places in the world could only dream of.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? And instead of looking
oil and gas, minerals, forestry.
Exactly. Instead of looking at all of that as our ticket to prosperity for our people, for our province, for our ability to fund the services we need, we put ourselves in the straitjacket. And for what?
Right.
What is the
fighting climate change?
What's the higher noble purpose that has been achieved by what has happened over the last number of years in terms of the regulatory regime, in terms of the inability for industry to do almost anything? You know, I guess we like to have some people would claim some sort of sense of moral superiority. But the challenge of climate change is a global challenge, and British Columbia has to do its part, but not at the consequence of bankrupting our province and hurting our people and sacrificing our services and our prosperity so some politician can feel good about themselves when they go to some climate conference halfway around the world.
Yeah.
And this also comes with British Columbia already. Forget what they did in the last number of years in terms of the additional regulation. We're already probably the most highly regulated jurisdiction on the earth. A place where there are environmental, robust environmental regulations, where there are labor rights, where people are paid decent wages. Most of these industries are heavily unionized, where there's human rights. And
lots of transparency.
We've allowed
engagement with indigenous.
Exactly. And we've allowed some people to talk us into believing that this is something we should be ashamed of. I will never forget an interaction I had with a guy who was a coal miner in Sparwood. And he worked in one of the tech mines there. And it was in Vancouver, and it was at a conference. And I was chatting with him and talking about kids and hockey and stuff like that. And anyways, we got around to asking each other what we did. And I told him what I did. And I asked him what he did. And he said, well, kind of leaned in kind of quietly. He's like, well, I'm actually a coal miner. But he's like, don't tell anyone around here that, right? They'll think that that's a bad job. That's like a dirty job.
Right.
And I had a great conversation with him and said, you shouldn't be ashamed of that for a nanosecond. You should be proud of that. People in the Lower Mainland have access to government services and hospitals, and their kids can go to school and all the things that we depend on because you go into that mine.
Yeah.
It generates so much of the wealth of this province, and it could do even more. But as I said, for whatever reason, I think based on a very ideological point of view, the government has tried to wrestle the natural resource industry to the ground. And now they're kind of singing a different tune about it with respect to LNG and the rest of it.
Well, the market's effectively forcing them to. Both the pending voting market, having the BC NDP, I think, have had to wake up because they almost lost the last election. Same with the federal Liberal Party.
But I guess on this, what I'm looking for, like, again, to my earlier comment, it's really easy for a politician to turn on the dime and say, "Oh yeah, no, I love LNG,
Right.
love mining." What I'll be paying close attention to is the follow through.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it just words, or is it action? Is government actually going to change its permitting process?
Sure.
Are we actually going to create a new process that doesn't allow a small number of people to hijack the process and to basically hold new projects hostage? Because that's what's been allowed to happen.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe on paper they could still happen, but in reality they don't, because they drag them on and on and on, and it takes years, if not decades. And eventually, the investment that is required to do these things says, forget it.
Absolutely.
Forget it. And so that is what I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just the words, or is there going to be some follow through?
Yeah.
And that remains to be
seen. They say the devil's in the details, Brad. One of my previous guests, everybody would know, is Chip Wilson, and he had a great saying. I stuck with me ever since we had that conversation. He said, "Money goes where it's most loved," and I think what you're highlighting, it actually is in the province here. It's actually far worse than what you're just highlighting of hamstringing a resource sector from taking off and being the global powerhouse that it used to be. I mean, mining used to be a big deal here in the city. And I can assure you, because I work in the financial services industry, I know a lot of miners. Almost all their projects are outside of BC. In fact, many of them are even outside of Canada, because it's so impossible to get a permit. Yet we have this abundance of resources, and there'd be nothing they would love more to do than to employ their own fellow British Columbians in building out mines here in BC. Oil and gas, for that matter, forestry, same thing. I know these business people. But I think the problem's even worse than this, Brad, because there's also the non-resource sectors. As a business owner with two other businesses, one in the cryptocurrency industry and one in EV charging, I can tell you, I've had serious conversations with my tax accounting teams about whether we relocate to Alberta or to, we're actually talking about going to Texas, because especially with our EV charging business, which will go North America wide. The environment here in BC is structurally works totally against us in trying to build a business.
Mm-hmm.
The other reason that I do this podcast, in fact, when I started, I didn't have politicians like you're on, yourself. My very first guests were successful business owners, and I still love having these people come on. People like Chip. I've had Ryan Beatty on. I've had Bob Rennie, our most recent guest, Brian Reed from Kindred Construction, because these business leaders are the people who are helping drive the economy. They're the ones that are putting their own money on the line. They're taking risks. And we have a cultural issue here in Canada where we vilify these people when they become success stories. In the United States, they literally get paraded around. They get taken onto a show called Shark Tank, right? But here in Canada, we have this perverted culture where we want to, say that, well, Chip Wilson's a billionaire or Jimmy Pattison's a billionaire. It's a failed government policy, And I look at this and go, these people are driving the economy. They're pioneers. They're smart. They take risks. They create jobs. They certainly pay a ton of taxes. And if you look at Lululemon as an example, I mean, you look at the spin-off companies that they've made it. I mean, Chip Wilson, and he's not a friend of mine or anything. I don't know him that well. I had him on my podcast. But, I mean, that guy has developed more successful female entrepreneurs and multimillionaire females in this city than anybody else has. So I completely resonate with your view that we have made it very difficult for the resource sectors to really take off. We've got this abundance of resources, but I think it goes one step further that we have to become a pro-business province again. There's no reason that we can't have we used to, in the 1970s, BC used to be the headquarters for many publicly traded, large size companies. We have almost none now.
Mm-hmm.
They've moved out of BC. It's a real shame.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's not a single person in my family who owns a business. And I don't think any of them ever have. And I'm going down the line. But they all had a job because someone went into business. And through their labor and hard work, they were able to contribute to the success of that business. And in doing so, produce a good quality life for their family.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get back to some basics around that idea, right?
Yeah.
And so I've never subscribed to that sort of vilification because my own family has benefited from people who have gone into business and have created employment. We can't have a province where everyone works in the public sector. It's not sustainable, and it will create a very, very precarious imbalance. And many people would argue that
I think we're there already.
Or well on our way.
Yeah.
So we have to acknowledge and understand that the role that business plays in, as you said, driving the economy,
mm-hmm.
and all the things that we derive from it, the services we depend on, the opportunity for someone to get good employment
mm-hmm.
and produce a living for themselves and their family. Like, we are intertwined. We can't, it gets back to my earlier comment around social cohesion. Like, we have to understand that our futures are not distinct from one another.
Mm-hmm.
If the province is going to succeed, it's because we're all going to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. So you believe in fiscal responsibility of government. You recognize that we've kind of got to go back to the basics and allow workers to work and businesses to thrive. So I think we're very aligned there. You are on the board of Metro Vancouver. How many board members on the board of Metro Vancouver?
Well, I don't know. I haven't met them all. There's too many of them. There's 41.
41 board members. In what world can anything productive happen when you have 41 board members?
Yeah, I have been pretty open about my view that there's way too many people. And I think what happens
Seems like a club.
Well, what it is when you have 40, like if you have 41 people in charge of something, nobody's in charge of something, right? Too many chefs in the kitchen, choose your analogy.
Yeah.
It's too large. And the reason why it's that way is because when it was set up, they used a formula that said for X number of people in your municipality, you're entitled to X amount of representation. And it probably was okay back when it was set up, right? But as we keep talking about, we've gone through a significant period of growth. So now you've got the city of Vancouver with, I believe they have 8 people there. City of Surrey has 7 people there. Burnaby has 3. Richmond has 3.
How many do you guys have?
We have 1.
Yourself?
Well, medium, remember?
Yeah.
We have 1. This is all dictated from provincial legislation. So
Right.
It'll take a change to provincial legislation to make it happen. And I think
how much does, if you don't mind me asking, how much does each board member get paid?
Well, that depends on how many meetings they might attend, because their remuneration model is based on a per meeting fee. And there again, I think that there's something that...
What's the average?
What the average person make?
Yeah.
probably between 25 and 30,000.
There's 41.
Yeah. So one of the discussion points has been, an alternative model of remuneration. There's been various options put forward on that. On the size of the board, though, I think it will change.
Yeah.
Because it's already, in my view, unworkable, and it will become more unworkable as communities continue to grow. At some point, like the city of Vancouver and Surrey will be entitled to more representation than they have elected officials on their councils, right? If it continues on this trajectory.
Yeah,
so it will have to change.
Yeah.
And the province will have to change it. And in
The
fact,
province can change it. That's their mandate.
yeah, they're the only ones who can.
They're the ones, okay.
Right? They're the only ones who
So you guys couldn't collectively say, okay, let's play a game of musical chairs. We'll just get the music rolling. We'll pull 10 chairs and
then whoever's
10
left.
of us, 10 of us have resigned.
No.
Okay.
Now, what the board can do and what I think it should do and what I think it's going to do actually is put forward a request, a proposal to the province and say, you need to address this.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not just Metro Vancouver. Every part of the province has a Metro Vancouver.
Yeah.
In Victoria, they have the Capital Regional District.
Yeah.
Right? And they're all...
It's the same thing.
They're all very similar in their operation and how they're set up because they were all set up, around the same time. They're all set up via provincial legislation. In Metro Vancouver's case, they've now have this governance committee that some people are on. I'm not, but they're creating a list of proposals to present to the board and then to the province to say, here are the reforms that should be implemented.
Mm-hmm. When I had Bob Rennie on, we talked about the housing crisis, and it's probably about a year and a half ago. He made a very strong argument, which I would agree with, which is that the housing issue is a Metro Vancouver issue. I mean, because you got lots of workers who maybe come to downtown Vancouver, but they live in other areas. And so if there's a way to solve the housing issue, it's got to be resolved with the lens of looking at the whole Metro Vancouver, not just each individual.
I would agree.
You agree? Okay. And I think about the CRD. I think about Metro Vancouver. CRD I'm familiar with because, as I said, I went to high school and university in Victoria, and I'm always perplexed at, I think it stands out more to me because some of these municipalities, like Vic West, are so small. And I think to myself, they have 13 municipalities, which means they have 13 mayors, 13 city councils, 13 different bureaucratic organizations that all run independent of each other, collecting taxes and working on infrastructure. I'm like, why don't we just start doing some mergers? As a capitalist, I'm like, well, you take 3 small companies, put them together, it's going to have efficiencies. You'd be able to lay off a bunch of people. You could start to, think a bit more as a group as opposed to individually. Why do we have, first of all, how many municipalities are in Metro Vancouver, Brad?
21.
Why do we have 21? I mean, we had, just for reference, my dear grandfather, who just passed away this summer, he was 101 years old, veteran in World War II. I learned a lot from that man. For those who don't know, Vancouver actually used to have 3 municipalities. Mm-hmm. West Point Grey, Vancouver, and South Vancouver. And shortly after he was born, or maybe before, they merged. Logically.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I was to go out to the market and I was to go around and canvass Vancouverites in city of Vancouver and say, hey, I got a great idea. Let's separate.
Go back the other way.
Yeah, let's separate and let's have West Point Grey and South Vancouver. I'm pretty sure most people are like, you're nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But today it's obviously been a smart move. What's your take? Why does Port Coquitlam exist separately from Coquitlam?
Yeah. All of this is decision points in history, right? And it's a good reminder of the far-reaching consequences of decisions that get made. So Port Coquitlam became Port Coquitlam in 1913 because Coquitlam was a rural agricultural-based community. And there was a group of people in that time who wanted to become more industrialized. And so that gave birth to Port Coquitlam.
Really?
Coquitlam didn't want any part of that. In fact, there's a newspaper headline when Port Coquitlam was founded that said its ambition was to be the Pittsburgh of Canada.
Oh, wow.
Very much based in industry.
Mm-hmm.
We have one of the largest rail yards in Western Canada in our community still to this day. Been a defining characteristic of it. So you could go to all of the different examples, whether it be the North Vancouvers, whether it's the Langleys, and they would be able to tell you a story about, at a point in time, why they came into being. So it's good to understand our history, but then I think it's important to reflect on where we are today. Now, there are a couple of different schools of thought. There's no doubt that if you were to amalgamate a number of municipalities, there would be some savings, primarily on the elected official side, right? You need one mayor,
But look,
fewer councillors.
That's not a big amount of money. I mean,
Well,
you guys don't get paid a ton.
No, that is the reality. It would be a very small amount of savings. The question is, would you get savings on the operational side?
Well, I would think
right?
so. I mean, first of all, these top people, the city manager, the director of finance, I mean, these people are paid far more than you are.
Yes. And so to answer that question, because your thought would be, well, yes. And I think there's a scenario where the answer is yes. But it won't be a self-fulfilling prophecy. It will only be if you set it up in such a way that that's what you get. Because I think there's been quite a few examinations of amalgamation in Toronto and found that the savings that were anticipated, in fact, did not materialize. Because rather than everything coming down to the lowest level, things came up to the highest level.
Right.
So if I can be parochial for a second, in Port Coquitlam, as I mentioned to you earlier, we have the lowest property taxes in the region.
Right.
Our property taxes for the average property taxpayer are $1,500 less a year. Do we think that everyone's going to come down to our level? Or do you think ours are going to come up?
The last people in Metro Vancouver that want amalgamation right now is going to be people in Port Coquitlam.
Probably. And, and I think there's also an argument about, do we build a beautiful new Port Coquitlam community center if we're part of the entire region? Now, that's not to say that there are not lots of different areas where you can have the concept of amalgamation or coordination take hold in terms of some shared services. But you know what? In thinking a lot about this, it is kind of one of those nagging questions that is always there, that never goes away. It is particularly salient right now. And I actually think that the provincial government should make this a ballot question in the next municipal election.
Yeah.
Have a referendum on it.
Yeah. Why not?
Take the temperature of what the public wants, right? Because it's the type of thing that it ain't going to happen overnight. So I think you could have a ballot question on it.
What would the question be?
Well, someone smarter than me would have to figure that out. But I think
but if you had to make a kick out,
I think it'd be something more. Do you support the amalgamation of Metro Vancouver into whatever, 1 municipality, 4 municipalities, 6, right? The details will matter, and there'll be a lot of specifics. But I think as a starting point, to maybe not bring finality to this, but to really see, is this something that the public thinks is of interest to them?
Right.
Or is it something that, it creates a bit of noise every now and then, but really people are happy to be a city of North Vancouverite versus a district of North Vancouverite versus a West Vancouverite.
Right.
Right? I don't know. I haven't heard any other bright ideas. So there's a suggestion. Government could do that. Put it on the ballot.
That's a neat idea. You know how I would phrase the referendum question?
How's that?
I would say, does the city of North Vancouver in favor a hostile takeover of West Vancouver? That would be a really entertaining question.
That would be slightly loaded, but there you go.
Yeah. Brad, you had the highest percentage of vote in Port Coquitlam's history during your first campaign for mayor in 2018. And as we indicated earlier, you were unopposed in the re-election in 2022. It's now 2025, and we're only just over a year away from our next election. Are you planning to run for mayor?
I am. Yeah. I love being the mayor of Port Coquitlam. I've lived in this community my entire life, and I still have a number of things that I want to see done, a number of things that I want to bring to fruition. I also love the fact that I get to help coach my son's hockey team. I get to be there for almost every lacrosse game. I grew up largely without a dad. My dad died when I was 10. And I think that has obviously impacted me in a number of ways, one of which is that I'm incredibly close with my mom still. But it shows you how delicate life is. And this time with my two sons is time that you will never get back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that once in a while my name comes up as, you run provincially or run federally. And I've always given the same answer. I will not trade this time with my kids for anything. And that was as true today as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow.
Yeah. Great. Well, good that you have that perspective. Brad West, Mayor of Port Coquitlam, thank you for being a return guest on Coastal Front. All the best to you and great work in the work you're doing there in your local municipality, but also speaking outside of your jurisdiction on bigger topics that I think is important to continue talking about. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.